Hello, I'm Jonathan Bowman-Perks, and welcome back to my favourite time of the week. And I'm delighted to have Richard Bourne with me. Richard is the CEO of Martin's Properties and has had a fascinating career in a variety of different property businesses, as well as being an ultra marathon runner. And also he set up a charitable venture called Abling, which we're going to be talking about as well. But Richard, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on board.
Thank you. Nice to be involved.
Yeah, it's great. And let's go straight into your sort of leadership background. Tell me a bit about that.
So yeah, thanks, Jonathan, and as I say, thanks for inviting me onto your podcast. Follow these and really enjoy watching them. So hopefully, a few snippets from me might help somewhere down the line.
Yep.
So currently CEO of Martin's Property. So we are a private property business, family owned. With property assets dotted around mainly the southern half of the UK, but predominantly in Chelsea. Mm-hmm. And I joined 3.5 years ago, took over as CEO 2.5 years ago, and really been given a remit to grow the business substantially over the next 5-10 years.
Yep.
So we've got more and more shareholders coming through with next generations of the family, and to try and really maximise the performance of the business. So we're looking at lots of different things since the last 2-3 years. Really, we've rebranded, got a lovely new logo in the background there.
I like it.
Thanks. And I've got the blue coloured suit on just to match. So yeah, it's all about branding. We've done quite a lot of extra PR, looking at processes and systems. Done a skill gap analysis, so we've resourced, and we've got a great team with us now. So it's an exciting journey.
Good. Well, that's great. And then what about onto inspiration? This is about, the logo says it behind, inspiring leadership. Who you mentioned when we were discussing sort of 3 leaders who've inspired you. Who were they? And tell me a little bit about why you chose them and the qualities that they had.
Yeah, I think it's really important to have some strong influences in your life, and it's important to be your own man, but also to take some good tips from people who've been there and done it. Yeah. And the first person I picked was, on a personal note, was my grandfather. He fought in the First World War, got a military cross, and reading his notes, I find it, I'm not a historian really, but I find it's really important. He's a man that the family talked about a lot.
Right.
Always someone who never had a bad word about anybody, but would always lead from the front. And if you read his notes about what he was up to, he was in the Somme, he was in some pretty some incredible battles.
Yeah.
But he led from the front, and he treated his men with the utmost respect. And I think that's a lesson I've learned a lot from. Even though I'd never really met him, I think I was 6 months old, sadly, when he passed. Yeah. But his legacy is strong, and I try and follow and lead by his example on that front.
That's great.
The second person I picked was Winston Churchill. I'm following a slightly historical theme here, even though I'm not a historian. But I think he's an example of someone who, in a very tough time, real-time adversity, had a very clear vision, steady determination, and he saw it through. And I think it's an incredible character trait.
And actually picking up on Churchill, obviously, with the Black Lives Matter movement and things like that, people are beginning to tear down statues. And I think we need to be careful who we sort of tear down in history, because, we could end up, as someone once said, ripping up the road from Dover to London because it was built by the Romans and slaves who were Anglo-Saxons who built it. So they should, dismantle the road. That was just someone being a bit lighthearted. Black Lives Matter is a very serious issue. But I think when we look at various leaders like Churchill and people like that, they're very flawed leaders in many ways. I think all of us are. I haven't yet met the perfect person. And so I just think we need to be very careful as we look back in history and try and find reasons to shame ourselves. But at the same time, we should also face up to the consequences of what's gone on. And things like, the French with the railway, the national railway they have, which took Jews to concentration camps in Germany and things like this. And IBM that provided the backup information and the database of where all the Jews lived in Germany, and was providing that to the Nazis. So there's a lot of history that can be dug up, but I do think Churchill did have some qualities that, as well as his dark side, that were very good. And who was your third one that you'd pick?
Yeah, I think just finishing off on that, if I may, Jonathan, I think that's really well put, and I think it's really important we learn and we evolve, and the country's moved and the world has moved on a long way over time, and it's important we continue to do so. That's what we all should be doing as individuals, as businesses, and as a culture. But I agree with you. I think the past, there were different times. Not saying I agree with what those circumstances were at the time, but you take Churchill. Without his leadership, without what he did and what the brave men and women did at that time, from all races and all colours, we wouldn't be in the situation we are today with the freedom we've got. So I think we have to respect that, despite what the dark part that they have. And I think the reason I picked him as well was he is a quote I always use and stick by, which is, the optimist sees opportunity in every difficulty, whereas the pessimist sees difficulty in every opportunity. I try and make sure I'm the former part of that.
Yeah, I like that one. I haven't come across that quote before. I like it. Good. What about amusing stories about you as a leader or situations you've been in? You tell us a good one. I think.
Yeah, I couldn't find a defined example, and sorry, that's not me trying to hide from it. But I think one of the things I try and make sure I do is I never take life too seriously. It's really important that I do expect people to work hard, and I am quite a tough taskmaster, that if you ask the team. But I try and make sure we mix it up with fun, and it's really important we have fun and we don't take life too seriously. You need to have a very balanced view, I think, as a CEO. You can't be very tunnel visioned and driven and not look at the bigger picture. So at Christmas, sadly, there are some photographic evidence, photographs dotted around maybe the internet, but certainly on our website, of me dressed looking like an idiot in a Christmas suit, a full business suit, with a tie. And I think
was it Father Christmas's on it?
Well, I try and have a different one every year, actually. So I've had 3 different suits over the last 3 years. But yeah, we've got reindeer, Father Christmases, presents, snowflake. It's awful, but it does mean that the team can see that there's a sort of human side to me, not a robotic driven leader. And it's certainly it's a level of when you walk down the King's Road and everyone's stopping and looking at you, and you realise you're meant to be some respectable CEO and you're dressed looking like you are. So, but I think it's important, don't take life too seriously, and I think things that put you out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, humour is really important, and a friend of mine, Roger Steer, talks about the 3 hums: humour, humility, and humanity. Really important in leaders. And particularly the humility. And we've seen with Trump, who wouldn't know what humility was if he walked into it, and various other leaders who get carried away with their own self-importance and actually rarely admit when they're wrong or they apologize. And that is very important. So the other thing we were going to talk about was a story of when you got it wrong and what you learned from it. And it might be not one particular story, but just you're someone I know who's spent a lot of time. You like to develop yourself and other people. You like to constantly learn. So what have you learned about yourself and traits that you could improve, and how to admit when you have got it wrong and to rectify it?
Yeah, as we talked about earlier, I think it's difficult for me to find one example. There's loads of mistakes I've made. I make mistakes continually. And I think one of the things that's really important, going back to that previous discussion we just had about not taking life too seriously, it's important that we all, as CEOs, understand that there's a huge amount of learning to do for ourselves and for the business, and to help others within the team to grow and to learn as well. I make mistakes all the time, and I try and make sure actually that I surround myself with good coaches, with some strong business leaders as well on the board, and challenge is really important. And one of the things I do annually is to make sure we have proper performance reviews and appraisals, and that is a detailed critique of me as well. It's not for everybody else, and the CEO sits there and pretends he's perfect. I'm far from. I'm still working every day to improve myself and how I perform. I think one of the things I'm not particularly proud of is and I'm working on is around trying to take a bit more time before reacting to things. There's examples I can think of, quite a few actually, where I probably allowed myself to get caught up in the moment and not to take time. And I've started to react to some of the things that are happening in front of me and to put my own opinion on it. And then we've driven down a path which, at the end of it, I've gone, is that where we should have ended up? And I think it's really important that the techniques I've learned from here is to make sure the 2 breaths and a think before you speak. So
2 breaths
don't
and a think.
rush in. When someone asks you a question, don't be quick to think. And it's much better, I think, and a much better example of a leader, of someone who can sit there and take, even if it's a minute, to respond. Rather than being impulsive
and longer, or sleep on it. Let me sleep on it and come back to you tomorrow.
Absolutely. And I, there was one example where I went down that road and I came out of that meeting thinking that was a bad meeting, and I ended up in the wrong place. And actually I did get everybody back into the room at that point in time and say, right, that wasn't a great meeting. And I hold my hand up, I didn't perform brilliantly in that meeting. So let's start again.
Yeah, good.
I think it's important as a leader, you have to acknowledge when you've made mistakes, accept vulnerability, and make sure actually doing things that are the right reasons with the right inputs from various different people, and it's not your personal opinion that's coming into it. You've got to be, as a leader, taking all the opinions together, taking all the facts, and then you might have to make those tough decisions. But it's really important not to jump into things.
That's very good. Really like that one. Okay, what about your top leadership tips to other executives who are listening?
Well, it jumps back to probably my inspirational leaders that I look up to. The first one I think is leading by example. So I would never expect anybody in the team to do something that I wouldn't expect to do myself. I try and make sure, setting reasonable objectives, reasonable targets. It's no good just saying I want 18 things done and it's got to be done by the end of today. You've got to be sensible. So I think leading by example, expecting people to or do things that you'd expect others to do and vice versa. It's really important. And just caring about your team. Without the team, you have nothing. You should be really guiding the tiller, and hopefully using some grey hairs, which are coming quite strongly, that come from experience and situations that you've been in the past to help your team through those. It is not there to be beating them down or indeed taking too much on yourself. It's another thing I think is making sure you delegate and give yourself the bandwidth to be that sort of strategic person, thinking about the bigger picture and watching and making sure everybody's rowing in the same direction and rowing comfortably hard but not sinking.
Good. That's a nice way of looking at it. And talking next, I'd be interested in your upbringing and how that shaped you as a leader from, when you were a child to then some of the things you did, going to, Reading and then on to your first jobs in John Laing and also Kier Property. So perhaps tell us about that.
Yeah, so the upbringing, I start with my father. He was my biggest critic as I was growing up. He's an ex-RAF reserves-man, even had an RAF moustache and a cane to go with it. So it was a fairly strict. There was certainly some guidelines and some boundaries which you didn't want to step out of line on. But latterly, actually, he was my biggest supporter, and he's sadly not with us obviously now. But latterly, he was always there to be the words of encouragement. He would be a very good devil's advocate. He would always challenge, and that's really important to have people around you that challenge you and make sure you're not running off with your own ego or ideas. So that sort of context around, I'm probably a balance between someone who pushes the boundaries a bit, but respectful of the boundaries as well. I'm also a twin, which... and
just sorry, before you go into the twin, which is a very interesting one, sadly, your father passed away recently. And what age had he got to? He
was 73.
Okay.
So yeah, he was diagnosed. Actually, he was absolutely fine, and then felt a little bit unwell at my uncle's funeral, and he was diagnosed with cancer. And
so sorry.
So it was all very quick. It was 2 months
Wow.
From that diagnosis. But he's. It's something you learn a lot from, losing people close to you, for sure.
What did you learn from that?
Well, I lost three people very quickly. I lost my grandmother, uncle, and father in the space of 2 months, and it taught me a lot actually about making sure you spend time with people and your family. It's all well and good trying to drive a business, but actually life is a much bigger entity. And one of the things that I probably regret, and I think I've learned a good lesson from, was that at the time I tried to set an example in the business of, because it was just at the time I'd taken over as CEO, was sort of being in the office and I'm not going to let this affect me and it's all absolutely fine. But actually, it'd be much better, I think, to have said, do you know what, actually, three things have hit pretty hard on a personal and actually it's much better as an example there as a CEO to turn and say, do you know what, actually I'm feeling it. And I would expect you as a team to take some time out and to process it. It's really important you allow yourself time to process and spend time with your family.
Yeah.
And maybe as an example I was setting there was, it's actually family's not important and work's the most important thing, and you should get back into the office. And that's not what I think.
No.
It was my personal thing at the time, thinking I need to be there for everybody, and I was trying to be there for everybody. And
you've got to really watch. And I relate strongly to what you said. I remember I was very young when my father was killed. I was 3. But my elder brother, who's 6 years older than me, we had in the space of 3 months, grandfather died, uncle was killed, and father was killed. And he was away at boarding school, and he said to my mother, please don't come and see me, because every time you come and see me, somebody else has died. And if you come and see me again, there'll be someone else who will die. He had that sort of connection between seeing her and hearing that someone had died. And you do, it really hits you hard, and you need to give yourself time. And I think a lot of busy leaders don't. And just like people going off on maternity leave and coming straight back too quickly, having had a child, it's the same when you've had another big life-changing event. Don't come back too quickly. Give yourself time. And we can talk about that bit more later on. Okay, that was a very tough one. And you said it's in your upbringing quite shaped by being a twin.
Yes.
You and is it Tim? Your twin?
Yeah. I think being a twin was wonderful, and summer holidays weren't boring because you've got a ready-made playmate, which was great. But I think the example is Formula One. They always say that the first thing you want to do is beat your teammate because he's got the same car, he's got the same kit. Fortunately, we don't have the same kit. We do look quite different.
What's Tim doing while you're doing this?
What now?
Yeah, what job does he do now?
I have no. Oh, he works for IBM. He's a management consultant, so he's
okay.
An intellectual. Which actually goes into the example. One of the examples I think that shaped me actually was because there's defining moments that happen to you in your life, and I think if you look deep into some of the things that have happened, you'll realise where some of your character traits come from and where your influences come from. In who you are. And I think being a twin clearly shaped me. I do remember very clearly mock GCSEs. I found, we were given our results from our mock GCSEs after a parent-teacher evening. And we were sat in the back of our parents' car. And I remember the conversation. It was, how do you think you've done? And Tim said, well, I think, I worked hard. I think I've done okay. And my parents said, yeah, we're really proud of you. You got straight Bs. You're going to be predicted to get straight A's for GCSEs. Really, really proud of you. And then it got to me. And I remember the conversation. I said, look, I worked hard, but I found them really tough. And they said, well, yeah, you've got some C's and D's with a spattering of B's and F's. And I remember my brother laughing, and then just saying, look, but the teacher's really proud of you. You've worked really hard, but you're just not that clever. And I remember that sticking very hard.
That would stick in the claw, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
that really would.
And I remember saying to myself at that point in time, that will never happen to me again.
You've been trying to prove them wrong since then, haven't you?
Pretty much.
Yeah, pretty much. I relate to that. I was told I was thick. I was going to be a dustman. Couldn't do my maths, couldn't spell. And you were told you were not that bright. Well, you've been proven how bright you are.
Well, I think to close that one, it was I worked hard, and I knew I had to work harder than others, and certainly my brother. So I used him as my sort of benchmark. So if he would work 5 hours a day, I'd go and work 6 or 7. I worked harder, and I ended up actually beating him at GCSEs. I had to go up on stage to go and get my academic tie. So I did have to define that it was the correct Bourne rather than my brother that should be going up to get the tie. But it taught me a lot, actually. It taught me that, some hard work actually does pay off, number one. And secondly, don't let other people define you. If I'd listened to the teachers and everyone else saying he's just a bit thick, maybe things might have been a bit different. And, I've developed coping mechanisms and strategies that mean, I had to probably read things 2 or 3 times rather than just one, where my brother will pick something up and he probably is a bit of intuition. He's a bright guy. But that doesn't mean I should benchmark myself against him.
Yeah. And also, I've learned, as you should, that there are many intelligences, and emotional and social intelligence, and the gardeners think about 10 different intelligences. And people shouldn't ask how intelligent are you, but how are you intelligent? What approaches do you use to succeed in life? And just passing an IQ test isn't enough these days. That only accounts for 6% of people's success. EQ accounts for 30%. And as the compass behind me shows, the other 64% is a whole range of other qualities, which we can talk about another day. Good. Okay. So from learning to be competitive with a twin, a father who was quite a stickler for discipline with his RAF moustache, but then became one of your biggest supporters. You then went on to Reading, to university, and to tell us about sort of university and then some of the other jobs that you did and how that shaped you.
Yeah, so like you, I was told I was going to be a dustman with my careers advice, and I think a long distance lorry driver, actually, because I enjoyed travelling in cars. But fortunately, I avoided that particular route. So I'd done a lot of building things when I was a kid, and so I was sort of suggested I went and did some work experience with contractors, so builders, and I worked with Taylor Wimpey down on the storm overflow in Brighton Beach. There's a big sewer tunnel under there. And I thought, this sort of getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning and just spending all my life in a tunnel underground wasn't really for me. So I was told that you should go and be one of the sort of, they were called the Gin and Tonic Boys, which is the charter surveying group, which would be much more my style. And I went and did some work experience with them, and they were right. It was much more my style. So I ended up being taught that, I decided that was the channel I wanted to go down, and Reading was doing the particular degree that was the market leader actually at the time. So I did a degree in land management and a master's in planning and development at Reading. Really enjoyed my time there. Had a great bunch of people who I'm still in touch with today, and still done some deals with actually as friends. And it's a great camaraderie and a great crew. Yeah. And I was very lucky in my last year to do a project where the outside visiting fellow that we were presenting to was a real life CEO.
Wow.
And I think that was what was good about Reading, actually. It sort of didn't just do the academic side. It was very applied and
that's really good.
Reality. And I remember being the chairman of my group, did the presentation, and being grilled by this CEO about the different short-term, long-term strategies for the particular asset we were doing. And fortunately, he asked me all the questions I'd prepared for, so I was very lucky. And he offered me a job. So I went straight into John Laing Property. It was a chap called Derek Arden, who was the chairman, actually, of John Laing at the time. So very lucky, and I really enjoyed my time. It was a really nice culture, actually. It was the most important thing, and the thing I really remember about that. It was a very positive culture. It was a very team-focused business. It was less about sort of the money. It was much more about actually having fun, some exciting projects, and that's what my lasting memory of that particular company.
Good.
And then we got bought out by Kier because, unfortunately, the contracting business, John Laing, went into difficulties, so they had to start selling businesses. So we went across to Kier. I was there for 3 years, spreading my experience across different sectors. So started out doing office development, went into industrial, retail, and did some other bits and pieces. Looking at transport hubs as well, which was really interesting.
And what did you, during your time in that move from one to the other, what did you learn about leadership and good ways of leading? And did you see some toxic leadership, really bad ways of leading that you were determined you were not going to do that?
Yeah, I think so. My first CEO was an incredible supporter. You know, he he listened, and I was just a graduate. I was, I just came out of university. I mean, who was I? But he really made me feel like I was an important person within the team. I remember being really worried about this whole takeover and sale process, because I thought I was, inexperienced, last man in, first man out type thing. So, but he said, look, I give you my assurance, you still have a job. You will have a job, because actually your salary level is going to be, it's not going to be the make or break. It's perhaps other people that might need to be more worried. So he really put an arm around me, and I felt very supported and felt very comforted through that. And I think that's a really important part. Looking through this current process, actually, we have Zoom calls twice a week. One of them is a wellness call. Mm-hmm. I use it very much to look at the body language of the team and try and see who's looking a bit unsettled, who's looking a bit nervous, and you can tell how people react, how people are talking. So I then take the opportunity to go and give them a call and just make sure they're okay. So that's the lesson I learned from that CEO. I think. Toxic question. The takeover is. I think a takeover of business is always difficult because you've got two cultures colliding. Yeah. And I think that there was many good traits of the CEO that took over, and it's a very difficult situation to manage. But I do remember feeling that it was sort of that. It was, this is our business, this is our culture. That culture's dead. Forget it. And I think I'd have managed that differently. You try and bring the best of both cultures together, and you've got to understand that you've got a phased integration that needs to happen. Yeah.
It's very hard. I mean, you've alluded to it there. It's very hard, Richard. I think there's an incredibly high proportion, something like about 85% of acquisitions don't really work. It's a vanity project where one person wants to gobble up and acquire something else and make themselves bigger. I was part of PwC that the consulting arm got taken over by IBM. And again, it was a vanity project. I think 2.9 billion they spent on it. And actually half of us left within 2-3 years because, and I would say it, but it was actually the ones who were mobile and were employable could move. The others hung on in there. Didn't mean that the good people didn't stay. The number of good people did stay. And I've got some good friends in PwC, but in IBM. But it destroyed a lot of value at the same time. And the value was often the people who get hit by it. And that, our way is the right way, the person who's taking over. And you guys have just got to buckle down and make a lot more money. And we're not going to develop you until you've made a lot more money. And someone said to me, run for the hills, if they're not going to develop you, run for the hills. But so you had that experience then. And then you also worked in a private family office. Tell us about that. That's quite an unusual area to work in, and a very specialized area.
Yeah, so 2005, I left the Kier, the more sort of corporate structure, if you like, and I went and joined a company called RO Group, which is another family office. And that was because the CEO of John Laing had moved across there and wanted me to go and join and help him spend some money. Invest some money carefully. So that was a really exciting time as a young guy who just got basic experience, really had some good training, but still very much early formative years. But I was young and enthusiastic, hungry to learn and to develop, and I really looked up to my CEO at the time and thought it was a really strong move. To kind of fly the nest, really, and to be, you're going to be visible. There's no hiding. It's me to go out and spend that money and show what I can do. And it was a fantastic sort of learning experience for me, a very steep learning curve.
Yeah.
We had a great deal of fun, and we had a good deal of success at the start. And then obviously the global financial crisis happened, and there was a lot of turmoil. We had two different things. We had an investment portfolio, development portfolio. The investment portfolio was quite high yielding, so it was relatively poor quality. So there was a real difficult time there, is looking at how we protect the business, because the values were falling, the loan to value ratio was going up, so the debt was becoming pressured. And we had assets that we were going, well, how do we get out of this? Because there's a very thin market. It taught me an awful lot. And actually it's just taking step by step, look at all the positives and the pros and cons of each of the assets, look at all the options, think about it, and then start making a plan for the whole portfolio. And we took the
So that's good training for the COVID-19 crisis that you've been thrown into as well, hasn't it? When you're here at the front, leading through the pandemic and beyond.
I think that experience, and actually the explosion of the building in Hemel Hempstead, two big crises that I've been faced in my career. I thought, actually, when the explosion happened, I said, well, I've had my once in a career crisis to deal with, and then 3 years later, I had the global financial crisis, and here we are again with COVID. So one thing I always do is try and break things down. So you have a clear vision, what you've got to try and do. If you try and think too big at the time, you'll explode. You will, pardon the pun, but you'll find it really tough. So with the COVID situation, set an emergency phase, then a consolidation phase, and then a recovery phase. And the emergency phase is very much about getting the team together, making sure they're okay, looking after your staff, communication with the customers, getting the office sealed up and secure, and whatever else we need to do, and getting everyone set up remote working. Once that was done, we were at full tilt, and then it's about, right, what do we do? This is going to be, we're not sure how long it's going to last, so we need to not just be in this sort of, we're working from laptops quietly for a couple of days. We need to consolidate now, and then it's the recovery phase. We're very much in the recovery phase right now, looking at how we can get on the front foot.
What's your reading of the way the economy is going to go going forward? I mean, who's to know? No one knows what's going to happen next week, but what's your reading of the economy and how the pandemic will continue to impact us?
I think it's going to impact us pretty hard. I mean, there's no getting away from the fact we're walking ourselves into one of the largest recessions we've seen. We're going to see some strong unemployment, and we're going to see some difficulty. But I think, out of every difficulty, there is opportunity. Go back to the previous quotes. And actually what we're doing as a business is trying to position ourselves so that we can get through this, and we're trying to help all of our customers and make sure we're not putting those businesses under pressure. So it's about, actually, we all have a duty in this situation to try and help the economy recover, and helping the economy recover means not letting businesses go bust. So I think we're in for a difficult ride, but I do think it will bounce back. I think there's a lot of cash out there. The funding, it is a very different situation to the global financial crisis, and I think we've got Brexit sort of sitting over here that is the other factor that can throw a curveball in. But look, I think I think we're in for a bumpy ride, but I think we will recover. And it's about, actually, all of us as business leaders pulling together, trying to help each other. I speak to there's about 10 business leaders I talk to regularly in a similar field and others. So we're just sharing ideas, sharing thoughts. And sharing experiences, so we can get a read and a handle on things. But look, I think the exchange rate is going to help us, certainly from a property business. It's making the UK property look particularly attractive and cheap at the moment. Interest rates are going to remain low, so borrowing criteria is going to be fairly helpful for people. And I think with a positive mindset, actually, I say that there will be opportunities to grow in the future, and that's what we're very much focused on.
Yeah. And do you think people are going to be renting in London, or are they going to be fleeing London in large numbers to go out to the Shires?
Well, I hope as a Chelsea-focused property owner, then they're all going to be flooding to Chelsea because it's a wonderful area. But no, we're seeing a real mix, actually. We've got some of our rents actually holding up very strongly, and in fact seeing some growth in some of them. We're seeing others dropping. I think the larger properties struggling a little bit. The sort of studios doing okay, the middle ones not so good, and actually houses. So people are looking for more space now. They want gardens. They want not to be cramped up in a tight area. So I think we will see more people moving out. Certainly, that's the feedback we're getting from a lot of our advisors. But I still think there's a strong demand for Central London living. Yeah.
Good. Okay. Anything else about your upbringing and what shaped you into the leader you are today?
No, I mean, I think those are the two. My father and the people around me. My twin brother certainly have been big influences on me.
Yeah, but in fact, picking up on your twin brother, I knew there was something I wanted to ask you about. That competitive streak, and particularly sporting and business, continues. Tell us about the ultra marathons that you've been doing and the distance running you've been doing.
Yeah, so if you've seen photos of me at school, you'd realise that the idea of doing an ultra marathon is just a joke. What
do you like at school?
I was a prop in rugby.
Right.
So, I mean, yeah, I was certainly not built for long distance running. But no, a number of things happened actually. I think the first one was a London Marathon in 2015. I'd been putting on a lot of weight, and I thought, well, I've got to sort this out, and I needed a focus. So someone had said, "Oh, I'm running the marathon," and I said, "Oh, I've always wanted to do that." And they said, "Well," and I'd had a couple of glasses of wine, to be honest. But, I said, "I think someone's just dropped out from our charity, so we need another charity runner." So I said, "Well, I'll do it." And I got a phone call at 8 o'clock the following morning saying, "I'm so proud of you to take this on, and thank you so much." And I was enrolled, and there was no getting out of it. So that was my introduction to long distance running. And do you know what? It was one of the bizarrely one of the most enjoyable experiences I've had. I think the crowds when you run a London Marathon is just absolutely incredible. And I sort of got the bug from that. And I do try and do a lot for charity as much as I can, which is one of the reasons I set up this charity. And perhaps
talk about that now, actually. Tell us about the charity now.
Well, just finishing off on the long distance stuff. Okay, so I ended up doing these 2 ultras for charity, and one of them was
because an ultra is tell people what an ultra marathon is.
It's a 100-kilometer run.
100 kilometers.
The first one, I got an unsuspecting team from the office together of 4 of us with mixed fitness abilities, and I count myself in that mixed category. And in fact, I'd got a slip disc at the time, so running was off the agenda. So we ended up having to sort of fast walk it. But it took us 24 hours. So we went through the night non-stop. And I was incredibly proud. And that taught me a lot from leadership, actually. You know, I was trying to push. But actually, for me, it was about getting to the finish line with the team.
With a slip disc. Did you know you had a slip disc?
Yeah, I was told not to do it. But again, sort of not a leadership example here. But because there's a lot resting on charity and the team as well, I just thought we've got to do this. And I think they were secretly relieved there was no running, but we got through it. And
100 kilometers. What did you raise? Do you have any idea?
We raised, I think it was £16,000 for Empire, which is a delightful little charity called Every Life is for a Reason. So helping biker of the severely disabled children, and about 90% of the money goes to directly to where it needs to be. So it's a
That's
great
very good. Yeah, no.
And then I did one which was the Thames Bar Challenge, 100 kilometers. I did that on my own. I couldn't find any other unsuspecting people from the office to join me on that one, so that was a solo effort. And I think I did that in 12 and a half hours.
Well done. Well done.
So it was great challenge. I enjoyed them.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's amazing. Well, so we talked a bit about darkest moments with the tragic death of both father, uncle, and I think you said grandmother in such a short space of time. What about darkest moments in any of the dark moments in what you've learned from them?
No, I think it's really important, as I say, to compartmentalize and to, whatever you're going through in personal life, you can't let it affect your team as well. So, and vice versa. Actually, it's important that even when you've got your stresses at work, you need to try and leave those at the door and
you do.
Time to rest and recover at home. So I think being able to deal with that's a really something I'm still learning, and just being able to sort of walk away and leave the things there, go and take a deep breath. A good walk, actually. I walk and run a lot, and I find that my sort of head clearing space, and it's a break between each of those activities, and keeping a fit, healthy body and mind is really important.
Yeah, no, that's very good. And what about the highlights of your life, the things you're proudest of?
Yeah, well, setting up a charity, I think, is up there for me in terms of one of the most proud things. It's a charity. Really, been really passionate about it. It's taken me a bloody long time, to be honest, to get it set up, and that's my downfall. But we got there in the end, and it stemmed from when I was able to take a young chap flying. I just got my pilot's license, a lifelong goal probably going back to my father's influence. And he had a double kidney, 90% scarring to both kidneys, so needed a double kidney transplant. So he was, didn't have a great chance of success, and he wanted to tick off his bucket list, last wish, and he wanted to go flying. So I was asked whether I could take him up, and I was able to do so. He flew most of it, and we got back down, and he was, it was very emotional. And one of the things it taught me is actually we've all got time, and some of us have got some. We're very fortunate to have some great, great exciting hobbies that we have, and we can share those with people who really, really need it and who can make a difference. So Abling UK is a charity or charitable venture I set up, which basically enables the members of the public. It's a free platform. Members of the public and businesses to donate their time and their hobbies and their fun activities, and even if it's just actually going for a walk with somebody and spending some time with someone who's lonely and vulnerable, to connect them with a community of people who are either terminally ill, under charitable care, or in the vulnerable category. And actually, we've extended it to include NHS workers, frontline NHS workers off the back of COVID. So it's connecting, and then hopefully people are going to start using it where, if you've got a fun activity or some time, you can donate it, someone connects up, and if we can help, say, even one person, it'd be fantastic. So I'm very proud of that. It's
rightly so. Abling is a great achievement. ABLING, and the website address for people to look for Abling, because there's
ABLING, ablinguk.com.
ablinguk.com. Well, thank you for that. So let's wrap up now, Rich, with the sort of final leadership tips you'd leave people with, and things you've learned on your journey that you'd pass on to share with other people.
Yeah, we talked about some of those tips previously, around leading by example, taking others with you. But I think there's two others, and that is really making sure you take the time as a CEO to rest and recover. I think you do understand your body and yourself very well as a CEO. You're left very much, it's quite a lonely position in many respects. So listen to yourself, listen to your body. And I think when you start realizing you're making some rash decisions, or you're feeling like things are just getting on top of you a little bit, it's time to take a rest. Yeah. And that's a benchmark I use a lot now. It's when you run 100K as well, you get to know your body inside out. I can really sense when I'm getting stressed, and when things are getting tight, I'm starting to make unusual calls, perhaps, or getting a little more ratty with people than I would like. So that's time to go and, even if it's half a day, just to go and take some time out and give yourself some headspace.
Yeah, very wise, very wise. Richard, thank you very much indeed. Richard Bourne, CEO of Martin's Properties, and good luck in the recession that is upon us now, and inspiring and leading your team through that, and helping your clients and dealing with a variety of stakeholders you have in the business. But really nice dealing with you, and thank you for all that you shared.
It's lovely talking to you, and I hope it's helpful. And thank you for inviting me on.
That's great.